Hi and welcome to my video. Here is a test of my 100% reusable space shuttle system. Basically in this video I'll just be giving commentary and letting you know how all this works. The craft file will be in the description. So I'll basically just be giving tips on like how to fly it properly and how every element works. So here you see it taking off from Ksp. At this point in the flight it's important to just basically rely on the SAS and not to mess with the attitude too much, because with all the wings it's quite easy for it to tip too far. So as you can see, I'm just leaving it pointing straight upwards as much as possible and until the atmosphere gets thinner. As you can see, now that I've left lower atmosphere, I slowly begin pitching over into my gravity turn, but very slowly and slightly. It's still very dangerous at this point, and it's important not to let it tip too far. Here you see me checking my apoapsis. It's pretty important that the first stage be able to take you all the way up into the edge of space, because that helps you be able to switch back to the first stage when you need to. So you'll see me keep switching, looking back and forth between the map view and this view to just make sure that I don't go too high and that I'm at the correct attitude. So right now my gravity turn is almost complete. I'm pitching past the 45-degree point, and now, because my apoapsis is high enough, I'm flattening out and accelerating sideways. At this point the atmosphere is so thin that there's no danger of tipping. When using this craft, it's very, very important that the first stage be completely empty when it's jettisoned, or else the aerodynamics of it won't function properly when it re-enters. So here I've just run out of fuel and I staged. I'm going to burn the engine of the second stage for a few seconds just to get some distance from the first stage. Here I am setting up my maneuver, and as soon as I reach the correct point I will circularize my orbit just to get into a stable place so that I can switch back to the first stage and watch it land. Here I am beginning my circularization burn. The shuttle has more than enough delta V to finish its orbit, so that's usually never a problem. You can see in the back there, the first stage still coasting to apoapsis. now that I'm in a stable orbit, I can switch back to the first stage and watch it land. Here I'm just quick saving. I find it really important to always do this whenever I reach orbit. So at this point I'm entering the atmosphere. I'm sure I know that you can't tell, but I'm actually not controlling this at all. Everything that happens from this point forward is just purely due to aerodynamics. The first stage starts to orient itself correctly. You can see the top is now facing upwards, and it's slowly getting into its glide pattern. The first stage has now achieved stable flight. It's now gliding completely on its own, without any help from me. So here it is gently gliding down. I'm not entirely sure what's going on with the nav ball, why it shows the craft being totally sideways. I assume it has something to do with how I position the probe core, but as you can see, it's gliding completely normally. Now just above the ground, the parachute's open, gently letting the stage descend. So here I open the landing gear, just as a precaution. A lot of the times it can land on its tail end and just stay upright, but just to make sure, I extend the landing gear to make sure we don't have any issues. So here it is, landed safely on the ground, ready to be recovered. So now we're free to switch back to the orbiter, so it can complete its mission. So here I'm opening the cargo bays, preparing to deploy the cargo. Here's the cargo leaving the cargo bay, and now I can close the cargo bay doors and prepare to deorbit. Here I had a small collision with the cargo, but that can be avoided with more careful piloting. So here I'm burning until my periaps is somewhere around 45,000 meters. I found that's a pretty safe altitude when re-entering the spaceships. At that altitude they can usually survive the re-entry heating. So here I am just warping until I hit the atmosphere. At this point I usually just leave the SAS pointed towards the prograde marker. It's a pretty easy way to just do the early re-entry. This is the longest and most boring part of the video. Feel free to skip ahead a few minutes if you want. Re-entry with space planes is always difficult and takes a long time. You can't just plunge straight into the atmosphere like you can with a capsule due to re-entry heating, so I'm sure better pilots than I can do this more efficiently, but I usually end up having to circle the planet at least once before I bleed off enough speed to actually land. At this point I was still aiming to land at Ksp, but as you're about to see, I overshoot by quite a long way. I'm still not very experienced with landing at precise points with space planes. Finally, my periapsis lowers itself enough that I'm considered as actually flying. Here I'm starting to worry that I'll overshoot Ksp. At this point, considering my speed and altitude, I realize there's absolutely no chance of landing at Ksp or the island, but I'm just hoping that I can make it to some other landmass to land. This shuttle is also capable of landing in water if you do it carefully enough, so that's an option as well at this point. You see me here checking the map to see if there are any islands or pieces of land that I can land on anywhere along my flight path. I start to worry here a little bit about re-entry heating, but it turns out not to be a problem. It's around now that I realize that my first stage has landed on this piece of land somewhere, so I decide to try and land nearby. You see me extending the landing gear to try and increase my drag since I'm still going a bit too fast. I'm not really worried about heating anymore, so you see me aggressively pitching down to try and lose more speed. Unfortunately, I've already overshot the land, but I'm hoping that I can turn around and glide back. With this craft, it's very important not to pitch up or down too heavily, because it has some massive flaps on the back, and any small motion really has a large effect. You're about to see this cause some problems in a few minutes. Here I start trying to turn back towards land. Unfortunately, I turn a bit too hard and end up spiraling out of control. Thankfully, I managed to recover, but it is a scary few moments. Thankfully, I still have fuel in my engine, so I'm able to use that to help me recover. Now I'm finally pointed back towards land, and I'm trying to use my engine to make it all the way there. Here you see me burning the last of my fuel in a last effort to reach land. I managed to get really close, but it's about here that I realized that I'm actually not going to make it. So I start preparing to land in the water just off the shores. Here I start folding the landing gear and pull up for a slower landing as I can. And touchdown. It's a bit rough, as you can see I lost the engine and the docking port at the front, but all in all it went okay. At my level of piloting, any landing you can walk away from is a success. So here I'm loading my earlier quick save because I'm going to demonstrate how if you take control of the first stage, you can actually land it on a runway. Here you see me deactivating all the parachutes. Those only get in the way if you're trying to land on a runway. You might find it useful to have the chutes on an action group since there are quite a lot of them. So here you can see me starting to steer in a large circle, so I can circle down onto a piece of land. Here you see me going into a dive to quickly lose altitude so I can land on the piece of land right below me. Here I'm extending the landing gear, preparing for landing. The stage is actually extremely easy to fly and it's very stable. Ironically, this stage is a bit easier to fly than the shuttle itself. So here you see me gliding gently towards the ground. It's about here that I realized that I might actually crash into this piece of land here. I tried to deploy the chutes at the last second, but it's too late. This is basically just a piloting error on my part, and I'm sure a lot of you can do a much better job. So that's about it. That's how a typical mission of my reusable space shuttle system works. I hope you enjoy. Make sure to check out the craft file in the description.